What is going on, guys? Castillo right here, and you know what? Skip the intro, skip everything else. We're gonna go straight into the news today. Nokishita has confirmed more information regarding the Sony A7C, and also I'm gonna show you newer images. Pretty much today we know basically everything about this camera. So let me start with the news. Yes, and I'm gonna read it straight from the side. So Nokishita is confirming that the Sony A7C is going to be 509 grams. Now this camera is going to measure 124 by 71.1 by 59.7 millimeters. So that's pretty good. Very light, very compact. Now here's the very first good news. This camera is going to have the same 24.2 megapixel sensor, backside illuminated. So this camera is going to have great low light performance, guys. And remember that we said that this camera was going to borrow a lot of the technologies from the Sony A7 III. I'm assuming that this camera is gonna borrow maybe just the sensor and borrow most of the technology from the Sony A7S III. So that's pretty interesting. Now, when it comes to ISO, and I'm gonna talk a little bit fast because a lot of things that I have to say, is 100 to 51,200. Nothing completely different there from other things, but we're gonna have an expandable ISO to 50 to 204, 800,000. So if you want to go that high, you're going to be able to do it with this camera. Now remember that we were saying that this camera may have embodied image stabilization. Well, Nokishita is confirming that we're going to have 5 stops of image correction in camera. So this is really good, guys, and most likely we're going to have the latest image stabilization that we can find in the Sony A7S III, which is actually very, very stable. I've seen people vlogging with the camera, videos, and it looks pretty good. So chances are that we're also going to have digital image stabilization as well, that you can actually pair it with the sensor image stabilization, usually cropping a little bit more, yet getting an even more stable image. So that's really good. Now here it is another indication that this is not going to be just a vlogging camera. This is going to be a great hybrid camera, because this camera is going to have a burst capability of 10 frames per second. So this is actually in line with all the full frame cameras out there, 10, 11 frames per second. So you're going to be able to use this camera to even shoot sport, in fast action. So this is really good, guys. So we were expecting this camera being crippled, when it comes to photography, but apparently we're gonna have great photography capabilities. Now let's talk about the screen, because we also were mentioning that this one is going to have the same flip out screen as the Sony A7S III, and indeed Nokishita is confirming that the panel is going to be the 3-inch panels, touchscreen capabilities, LCD, and most likely we're going to have the brand new menu that we can find in the Sony A7S III, which is very awesome, guys. Now, we are going to have the same battery as all the full frame cameras, the latest one, the MP-FZ100 battery. And remember, yesterday I mentioned that maybe we may see the smaller battery because the grip actually looks very short, but then I realized that the body is actually thicker, and this is how they're able to accommodate that battery. But there is a problem, and someone brought it up on one of the videos that I did yesterday, that the camera seems to have the grip way too close to the lens. But I mean, it's kind of like the A6000 cameras, you also have the grip very close to the lens. It's not a problem with this lens that they're showing right now with the PANCAKE lens, and we're gonna talk about the lens, but it could be a problem if you put, a bigger lens like a, like an 85 millimeter f1.4 G Master, for example, where it's going to be very unbalanced if you put that lens in this camera. Remember that we talked about this camera having a gray option and a black option. What happens that it's going to be a completely black option and a gray and black option. So, I'll probably stick to the black. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. The first thing that we realized right here is that we don't have the 2 custom buttons that we have on all the A6000 camera, the latest ones, the 2 right behind the shutter release buttons. Right now, all those buttons are gone, and in place of those buttons, we have a dedicated move or record button. Again, this camera is intended for vloggers, but there is room for 1 custom button there. I don't know why I didn't put it. No clue. Now, what else we can tell about this camera? We can tell that we're gonna have the EVF, this little side EVF that we have in the A6000, and we have a hot shoe mount on the camera. Yeah, now let's talk about the lens, because this lens is, in my opinion, misses the mark completely about vlogging. It is 28 to 60 millimeter. The aperture is 4 to 5.6. You know, it's okay if they have to make that, you know, crappy aperture, you know, just to make it small, but the focal length doesn't cut it for me, doesn't cut it probably for most vloggers out there. 28 is not wide enough, you know, and chances are that people are gonna end up putting, you know, the 20 f1.8, which is actually a great lens, and it's gonna look really good. It's also a small lens and pretty light. So that's that. You know, the next picture shows the gray version. You know, so you can see, pick the one you like. Let me know which one you prefer out of these two cameras, and or if you prefer none. Okay, let me actually flip the camera right now, show you guys what we can tell from the back. Now, the first thing that we can tell is that we have a brand new dial that we've never seen in the A6000 bodies, and that dial right there is going to be great for the shutter speed control. Now, in all the A6000 cameras, you know, you have the back wheel, the D-pad, you know, scrolling wheel that you use for the shutter speed and the ISO. So now you can actually have a dedicated shutter control wheel, which is pretty much where you would expect it, and then control the ISO with a back wheel. Now, someone mentioned yesterday, you know, it would be nice if you can configure the exposure compensation, because if you can do that, you know, customize it to control the aperture, now you have control of the exposure triangle with 3 dials, and that will be really good and make the camera very useful for photography and video, pretty much making it like a very nice compact hybrid camera. And from the other side, we can see the, you know, the screen being flipped out, you know, very similar to the Sony A7S III. And again, like I mentioned before, we're gonna have probably the same capabilities, touchscreen capabilities, and we also gonna have the brand new menu. So this is at a glance everything we know. You know, we know that this camera is gonna do 4K video 30 now. There are rumors that this camera is gonna record internally 10-bit and that it's gonna have one SD card. Chances are that we may see only one SD card. I can see that little door right there. Yeah, it's just one single SD card. And what else we know about the camera? You know, we're gonna have the latest technology when it comes to Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, USB-C, the whole 9 yards. But we were saying that this camera is going to be a dedicated vlogging camera, but for what I can see right now, we may have a very capable overall camera, and I can understand how this camera can be maybe a little bit more than $1,500, which is the price that I actually aim for this camera. Now, if Sony manages to keep the price of this camera at $1,500, they're gonna sell a lot of these cameras. If this camera is $2,000 or a little bit more, a lot of people are gonna skip it and wait for the A7 IV, which the A7 IV is gonna be a full frame body, you know, with a full enchilada. And the A7 III, still today, a great video camera, great photography camera. So guys, what do you think about this news? You know, what do you think about the new images leaked? Are you still considering this camera? Are you getting somewhat excited, or you're gonna skip this camera and wait for the A7 IV? Drop your comments down below, guys, and as always, subscribe to this channel for more content like this one. I'm planning to continue to report on this baby until this baby's released. Until then, see you in the next video.